I am Leo Asuncion. I'm the chair of the PUC, and we are hosting this informational meeting. With me are my fellow commissioners, Commissioner Kuae and Commissioner Yost. We also want to acknowledge, I believe, Senator DeCoit is here, interested person. So thank you, Senator. We did invite also the other electeds from Maui County and also from the state legislature, but the Senator was with us this afternoon on a tour of ECO's facilities down in Ma'alaya, so we did see her earlier. Again, wanted to welcome you. If you do intend to comment, there's a little comment period after the presentations. Please make sure to sign in. I got a list already of 5 people that want to speak. If you did not, please do so. Oh, on here is Tom Cook from the County Council. Thank you, Councilmember Cook. We'll get to you. Fine, but I first want to turn it over to Michael Angelo, who is the Executive Director of the Division of Consumer Advocacy, better known as the Consumer Advocate. So Mike, I'll have you take it over for you.
Thank you, Chair. Aloha, everyone. Appreciate the opportunity to be here and talk a little bit about what we do for rate and how our office works and how you can engage with us if you have concerns over your regulated utility service. So if you could go to the first slide, Andrew. And folks can follow along on the slide deck, and we have information. These should be available online as well. So we're a state agency division, and that we work for you. Anyone who pays a utility bill from essentially a privately owned utility. If they're a regulated utility, we're working for you. A lot of our we have a broad role, so we cover a lot of sectors that include electricity, gas, water, wastewater, telecom, and transportation. We cover a wide range of sectors on the transportation side. So if you're shipping goods inter-island with Young Brothers, that's a regulated. We advocate for you in those proceedings. If you have take Honoheke expeditions, ferry service between Lanai and Maui, that's another regulated business as an example on the transportation side. A lot of what we do is the utility will, I should talk a little bit about our team. We have a really diverse team because utility regulation, as you can imagine, involves a lot of things when a utility comes in. So we have a team of experts that includes attorneys, accountants, economists, engineers, analysts, social scientists. We kind of run the gamut. We have a very broad and diverse team, and that's because there's a lot of broad and diverse issues. It's not just when it comes to getting the power to you affordably, safely, and reliably. And I'd also like to add that one of the things that we do is help consumers understand their rights regarding regulated utility service. And just so folks are aware, we have some takeaway materials that folks can review outside that largely we do in this presentation. And also we have our utility assistance programs and resources. So we've compiled, thanks to Val, our education specialist, has gone through and compiled a lot of resources for customers with their bills, so you can take permanent solutions to permanently reduce your bills. Things that like help with upfront costs for energy equipment, and then also if you run into trouble, you know someone who ran into a little financial trouble and they need help bridging their paying the bills for a little while they get back on their feet. So those will be available up front, and you can pick those up. Oh, sorry, they'll be available from our education specialist, Valerie. If you like to pick those up for someone you know, or yourself, or you're interested, or your community, please see Valerie. Next slide, please, Andrew. So sorry, back one slide, Andrew, I'm sorry. So what we do, the utility makes requests, and we review their proposals. So these could be things like rate change. They want to come in for a rate increase. And like I said, the utility sectors involve a number of sectors: electricity, gas, water, wastewater, a number of sectors, and or different proposals. So they may have a renewable energy plan. They may have, it could be a large capital improvement project. What we do is we review that to make sure that it benefits consumers. And what we look for, generally, what does that mean? We look for things that are delivered safety, make things more safe, is it more reliable? These are the questions that we're going to ask. Is it more cost effective? Does it make things more affordable? Are things delivered more equitably? And in addition, or is it aligned with our state's clean energy and renewable goals? And there's different ways we want to keep you informed. The public, it's really important that the public is involved. We want to hear from you so that we can best advocate for you. And I didn't mention on the previous slide, we don't represent just residential ratepayers. We represent businesses. We represent large commercial customers. Statutorily, we cover anyone who pays a bill from a regulated utility. And how you can get involved, there's public hearings and public meetings such as this one. We really strongly encourage folks to the extent that they can to get out and make their voice heard. We pay attention and watch those things so that we can understand what the concerns of the community are. You can submit a public comment. You can file a complaint. If you have questions, you can visit the website that's on there. Or I'd also like to point out there's an energy equity docket that's going on right now that considers how electricity service is delivered equitably. We encourage the community to get involved in that docket. You can see the links up there. And you can also, and I'll have some other contact information on the following slide, Andrew, that if you want to know more or you want to get in contact with us, you want to talk to us, please do reach out. And this is information like we can help folks understand what their rights are with respect to being customers of utility services. So, and if any questions, I'll be around at the end of the meeting. Please do stop by. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mike. You know, a lot of the reasons why it's a purpose here on why we are holding this public meeting is very aware of challenges that is going to happen on Maui Island. And as soon as 2027, 2028, we're going to see those things come to life. And so we wanted to get ahead of it and start to have the discussion around what do we do. And we're talking about reliability of the grid. We're talking about resiliency of the grid and the like. As you folks know, you guys were at one time had a number of projects online. And then the pandemic hit and those projects did not come to fruition. Developers pulled out and the like. I think there was like 5, if I'm not mistaken, 4 that pulled out, but there were 6 projects, right? So 4 pulled out. And so, right, in all the planning that led up to those projects, right, the utility was actually planning on having those online, right, by the 27, 28 timeframe. But now that those projects are not coming to fruition, we do have another RFP. I know Hawaiian Electric is going to talk about that RFP process and where that is. But those are targeted for 2030, right, to come online. So you see the situation here, and they're going to talk about the challenges and some of the solutions that they have right now. So let me turn it over. I believe it's Mike DiCaprio, Vice President of Power Supply at Hawaiian Electric. And it off, we have a bunch of people that will go through their slides and their presentation. Mike?
Thank you, Chair. So as introduced, I'm Mike DiCaprio, VP of Power Supply for Hawaiian Electric. It's my pleasure to be with you all today. Can we go next slide? Next slide. Who's running the slide? Sorry. Oh. Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit today about our generation situation on Maui along the lines of what the chair said and some of the current state and the challenges that we see coming in the future. And as the chair said, we have a lot of initiatives and directives and goals to transition the Maui grid and all of our grids in our service territories to renewable energy. So among those, we will reduce carbon emissions by 70% by 2030. We intend to reach net zero emissions by 2045, and ambitiously and to the extent possible, we intend to have all our energy locally produced and procured in Hawaii. So in other words, Hawaii powered. Next slide. But we step back and we need to look at the energy transition, and we need to remember that the transition needs to include everybody. So we've made a couple of declarations of how we make this transition. So first, it's renewable energy first. That's our first choice. But then we still need to maintain reliability. We need to put assets on the system that keep generation reliable and resilient. We need to be able to serve the customers reliably, and we need to be able to weather storms and events and other impacts of climate change that may come to us. And we need to do this in a manner that results in affordability for our customers. So next slide. So I'm going to start off with what we have today on Maui. So I'm going to step back and just talk about how we view generating units. So we have two buckets of generating units. One we call firm, and one we call as available or variable generation. Firm generators are generators that can be available to support the system and provide energy to our customers 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, regardless of weather. Whereas as available energy is energy that supports our customers, but it's available as the sun or the wind or other resources are there to allow it to generate electricity. Both forms of energy, firm and variable, are important for all the objectives that I previously talked about. It's important for reliability, resilience, and affordability. They all are important in that regard. They just serve our customers in different ways. So starting with the firm generating units on Maui, we have about 253 megawatts of firm generating units on Maui. Starting with the Ma'alaia power plant, we have 212 megawatts of generation available to serve our customers from the Ma'alaia power plant. That station consists of a bunch of diesel generators as well as combustion turbines. So if you're not aware, a combustion turbine is essentially a jet engine. So it's jet engines that make power. The combustion turbines at Ma'alaia have the opportunity to operate in what's called combined cycle. In that manner, we're able to take the exhaust heat from those turbines, make steam, and turn a steam turbine, which results in a very efficient process. All the generating units at Ma'alaia consume diesel fuel. At the Kahului power plant, we have about 38 megawatts of steam generating units. So these are 4 steam generators and 4 steam turbines. A steam generator is a boiler. So we put fuel into a boiler, we make steam, that steam turns a steam turbine and makes electricity. So we have four aging generating units at Kahului totaling 38 megawatts and consuming industrial fuel oil, a heavy oil. We also have a small 2 megawatt diesel generating facility at the Hana substation. It primarily serves the Hana area during a loss of transmission to that area. We also have 234 megawatts of as available energy on the system, which includes more than 100 megawatts of rooftop solar on the Maui system. And that's a lot, right? So our peak load on Maui is less than 200 megawatts, and we have more than 100 megawatts of rooftop solar. Of course, we also have the stated privately owned wind farms and privately owned solar farms on the island. I note the newest addition is the AES Kuaheilani 60 megawatt solar plus storage facility. So that's the largest solar farm in the state of Hawaii, and it also includes, like I said, a storage component. So it allows us to take that excess solar energy during the day when we don't have room for it on the grid, let's say, and use it in a period of time where it's needed to serve our customers, typically the peak load or after overnight. Next slide, please. So that's what we have today. But what's happening tomorrow? Well, by the end of this decade, we will have to retire 88 megawatts of our fossil fuel generators. That's roughly 35% of the firm generation capacity on Maui. That's a lot. So let's talk about why that is real quick. So by the end of 2027, we were supposed to retire the Kahului power plant because of conditions in its air permit that require it to retire. The air permit has rules, is governed by the Clean Air Act. And there's a program under the Clean Air Act called Regional Haze, which requires states to implement plans to restore the national parks to natural visibility. And so the state implements a plan to do that, and part of the state's plan requires the retirement of the Kahului power plant. So that plant was scheduled to retire in 2027. It's still scheduled to retire by the end of 2027, but we did receive earlier this year a one-year extension to the air permit that will allow it to operate to the end of 2028 if it is necessary to do so. We also, between 2028 and 2030 or 31, will lose about 50 megawatts of our diesel engines at the Ma'alaya power plant. The manufacturer of those engines has informed us that they're obsolete and that they will no longer supply parts for those engines. Being that these engines were not produced in large numbers back when they were made and that they really were filling a niche market, the availability of aftermarket support and parts is non-existent. So we've acquired all the parts that we can to keep maintaining them and doing their overhauls as necessary, but we will start to run out of parts in the 2028 to 2030, 31 timeframe. So that totals 88 megawatts of firm generation, or roughly 35% of the island's firm capacity retiring by the end of this decade. And as I mentioned, the 60 megawatt Kuahilani solar and storage project that was commissioned last month, earlier in June, is the first step in being critical to allowing us to successfully retire these fossil generating units. Next slide. So this is just graphically showing you what I mentioned in the last slide. So the colored bars are when that unit will achieve its next overhaul. And when they turn gray, that's basically when we anticipate running out of parts for that generating unit. And then we show the Kahului power plant retiring in late 2028, again, with its current plan and target of actually being the end of 2027. Next slide. Okay, so where do I see the generation condition on Maui today? Today, the generation condition on Maui, I believe, is stable. So for years, we have complained or stated that we had concerns with the energy margins, the generation margins we have on Maui. Today, that is temporarily resolved with the commercial operation of the Kuahilani solar storage project. And it's stable because we have acquired those maintenance parts to keep those engines maintaining to that 2028 to 2030 timeframe. And we got that one-year extension for Kahului, as I mentioned, to keep running that unit till the end of 2028 if that's necessary. And we continue to invest and maintain in our generating units. We have overhauls, we have capital projects, investments in our generating units to keep them reliable and able to serve our customers, and we continue to do that. But by 2028, as we retire this 35% of our fossil generating units, I think the condition is, there's going to be a lot of risk and a lot of challenges unless certain things are done. And we have plans to make sure that that transition is reliable. But it's going to be challenging. But that reliability, that ability to retire those fossil generating units starts with the construction and then commercial operation of the 40 megawatt battery at the Waiena substation. That battery will allow us to take extra energy during the day from the grid and use it overnight at the peak or other times when our customers need that energy. So it starts with that 40 megawatt Waiana project that is in progress. Additionally, last year or earlier this year, we announced the results of our latest round of generation procurement, which we refer to as our stage 3 procurement round. In that round, we selected an independent power producer to construct and operate a 40 megawatt firm renewable generating facility also at the Waiana site. That project is critical in allowing the retirement of the fossil generators that I've mentioned. And similarly, the other solar and storage projects and wind projects that are selected in the RFP, those projects are critical in maintaining and allowing long-term reliability on Maui. And I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca Dehoff, our Vice President of Renewable Acquisitions, who will talk a little bit more about our procurement.
Thanks, Mike. Nice to see everybody here today and online. So as Mike mentioned and Chair mentioned as well, we have been going through several procurements. So we named them stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3, not very creative, but our stage 1 and stage 2 projects, we selected 6 projects for the island of Maui, 5 solar plus BESS projects, and then the Waiana standalone BESS that Mike just mentioned. We are only left with 2 today, the AES Kuhilani project, which just went into service, and then the Waiana BESS project, which is in development right now. But that does leave us with needing to continue our progress to make sure that we can hit those retirement dates that Mike mentioned. So if we go to the next slide. As Mike mentioned, we just finished our stage 3 procurement at the end of December. We picked several variable projects, and then in January, we picked a firm project. So we had originally picked 5 projects and announced those 5 projects. We have already lost 1 project from the 5 that we selected due to site control issues, unfortunately, but we are left with 4 projects, 2 new solar plus storage projects, as well as the existing Kahihawa wind project was renewed for a new 20-year term. So that's not going to be a new development. We just are going to renew that project and allow it to continue for another 20 years. Which is good that it's in the ground, it's up and running. That reduces a lot of risk for at least those 20 megawatts. And then we have the firm 40 megawatt biofuel project that will be on our Waiana site, but it is being developed by an independent power producer. All of these projects have a GCOD in the 2027 timeframe, except for the wind farm, which the new contract will start in 2026. These we'll go through the next steps for these projects. And on the map, you can see where all of these are located. We can go to the next project. Yeah, thanks. So these projects still have a lot of steps to be done to be successful. What we're doing right now is we're going through a study phase for the project. So we do what we call interconnection requirement study projects to make sure that the projects are going to interconnect or connect to our grid safely and reliably. We are also, at the same time, working on contract negotiations with these developers. So we're hoping to finish these first 2 steps by the end of this year. That's our goal, though that, we'll see. But we're working towards that. And then we'll have to submit those contracts to the Public Utilities Commission for approval. During that approval phase, we have actually already started what we call early engineering, starting the very basic engineering with these developers. But after PC approval, the developers will really start in earnest with engineering, procurement, and construction of the projects. And then once they're built, they do have to go through testing, again, just to ensure that they're safe. They're not going to cause any issues of stability or reliability on the grid before they'll go into commercial operations in the 2027 timeframe. And during this whole time, we are also doing community outreach and engagement. The developers are required to do that. And we'll talk about that a little bit more on the next slide. But before I get there, I did want to note, I think Mike mentioned that our goal was to hit 70% decarbonization by 2030. I did want to note, though, that we want to make sure we're doing this safely. And so we have pulled back that goal. And now we're aiming for the early 2030s to make sure that we're doing it reliably. We're hitting all of those other key components, including safety that Mike mentioned. So I did want to note that it'll be more into the early 2030s than right at 2030. So as I mentioned, all of these projects are required to do community outreach, and through each succession of our RFP process, we've tried to improve that. We've tried to listen to the community, take the community's input, and really make the process more robust. So in stage one, really all the developers were required to do was hold a community meeting one time prior to when we submitted the contracts for approval with the commission, and to submit any comments received to the commission so the commission could understand the community's feedback. In stage two, we took that a step further. We required developers to have project websites that are available to the public. We require the developers to submit a community outreach plan, which we evaluate as part of our decision on which projects to select. We require them to do advertising and implement a media plan, and to conduct, as many community meetings, do more community outreach, not just meetings, but go and talk to local communities, talk to the legislatures, talk to the neighborhood boards and the city councils, and really make that a more robust process. And then in stage three, we took it a step further and we required developers to offer for the first time ever a community benefits package. So that was always something they could do. They would get extra points in the evaluation, but it was never required until the stage three. So all of the projects that I just mentioned on the previous slide will be required to offer community benefits to the communities that they're located in the amount of $3,000 per megawatt for their project. And they can do that either through pairing with a local nonprofit that works with the community or directly with the communities themselves. And we do monitor that and make sure that they're complying with those. And there's terms in our contract with them to ensure that they're doing that and making sure that those funds are going to the community. And then we're going to just take it even one step further. So I'll talk about our next RFP that's coming up soon. And in that one, we're actually including the requirement for the first time, or we propose, it still needs to be approved by the commission, but the requirement for the first time for developers to actually do community meetings prior to selection, and for us to take the feedback received and to evaluate it as part of the evaluation process. So that's a new step that we're proposing for our next round of RFPs that we have not yet started. So speaking of that, going to the next slide. So we're moving off of stage one, stage two, and stage three. And our next slide, our next RFP is going to be called our Integrated Grid Planning RFP. Mark, who's going to talk next, and his team have worked a long time on our Integrated Grid Plan, which was really our plan for the future for how we're going to meet all of our reliability, resilience, generation needs, safety needs. So for right now, for round one, we're not anticipating procuring any additional generation on Maui. We do believe, even with the one project dropping out from stage three right now, that we'll be okay. We'll be able to hit those 2027, 28 retirement dates that Mike talked about. I will caution this, if another project were to drop out, then we may have to change that. And also this RFP is still going through the PUC approval process. So that could just change as part of the approval process too. But we do anticipate needing further generation on Maui beyond 2027 and 2028. And so the way we plan to do the IGP RFPs, they will have succeeding rounds too. And we do anticipate that in the second round, at least, there will be procurements for Maui at this time. Again, that's all in the future, so that may change. But that's where we are now with our plans for procurement and new generation. And I'm going to turn it over to Mark, who's going to talk a little bit more about the grid.
Thanks, Becca, and thanks everyone for being here today. As I think noted on the agenda and Chair highlighted and others, talked about how we plan our system to ensure that we have sufficient generation in the future and the steps we go through. So I want to start with this illustration here. It's a pretty good illustration of showing where all of these different projects that Mike and Becca referred to earlier, you can see that they're kind of scattered throughout the island. We have a mix of wind projects, solar, as well as firm generation. And just noting, last year on Maui, we achieved 35% renewable percentage. And I think on one day, we did get up to around 70%. But you can kind of see on this slide here where all these different projects are going to be located on Maui Island. Okay, next slide. Okay, so when we talk about generation reserve margins, we do a lot of planning to make sure that we're going to have enough generation to be able to serve the load. So we don't want to be in a situation where we need to turn off customers because there's not enough generation to serve the load. So to give an idea of what that looks like today, as the previous speakers mentioned, Kohelani Solar is online. So that does add to the amount of generation that's available. On top of that, in the blue is the various wind plants on Maui Island. So that's about 72 megawatts. Kohelani Solar is about 60 megawatts, and it has a 4-hour battery. And that battery is useful because we can charge it during the day with solar, and we're able to discharge it during the evening when the loads are higher. And then next is the Kahalui Power Plant, and then Ma'alaya Power Plant. So today, I would say the peak load of Maui in 22 was around 200 megawatts. Post August of last year, it's been more around 187. So as Mike mentioned, we believe at this time the generation adequacy is stable on Maui. A couple other things I want to point out on this chart, which hopefully isn't too confusing. There's 2 red lines there. So one is the bottom line, what I just referred to as the actual peak on Maui Island. And then the line above that is what we normally plan our system to ensure that we have enough buffer or margin in case anything goes wrong. So typically, for example, the peak is 200 megawatts. We like to have at least 30% more generation above that. And that's to account for any unforeseen circumstances, generators needing to unexpectedly undergo maintenance and what have you. So that buffer is roughly around 60 megawatts. You can also see though on a windy day, the reason why we have that buffer is on a windless day, we may not be able to get 72 megawatts from the wind plants. So that reduces the amount of generation that's available. So that margin kind of helps us to account for all of these different things. And that's also why firm generation is important, because on days where you don't have any sun or any wind, then you want to make sure we're still able to serve the load. Looking forward, as Mike indicated, there's going to be a lot of firm generation that will need to come offline. So you'll see on the right-hand chart, the Kahalui Power Plant is no longer in that stack, and the Ma'alaya Power Plant megawatts is a lot smaller. But in its place, we expect to have the new firm generation from stage 3 that will be at Wa'ena, and that's 40 megawatts in the green. And then above that, there's a Wa'ena battery. That's just a standalone battery that can be charged at any time of the day to help with the evening peak and to also absorb any of the excess wind and solar during the day. And then that's about where your peak is. And then there's that buffer. And then we have that, again, Kohelani Solar. And then we have these other stage 3 projects that Becca just mentioned. So all of these projects put together, we feel the combination of them, and we analyze these things closely, that we'll still be able to maintain our reserve margins, even on days where there's not a lot of sun or wind. So that's a brief overview of the reserve margins. So even going forward, we're doing a lot of these procurements and planning to ensure that Maui will continue to have a stable generation system for the years to come while reducing our fossil fuel usage. And with that, I think we're going to switch topics a bit from generation, and I'll hand it over to Matt McNeff, the director of Maui.
Thanks, Mark. As Mark said, I'm Matt McNeff. I'm the Hawaiian Electric Director for Maui County. I'm going to talk a little bit about the plans Hawaiian Electric has for Maui County, and in many cases has started already. So over the next couple of years, Hawaiian Electric plans on investing over $90 million in upgrades to the system, things like pole inspections, pole replacement, electric line replacements. We have deployed devices out in the system that help us identify and locate problems that need to be repaired, as well as we are deploying weather stations and cameras across the islands to give us better visibility into the weather conditions at different locales across the islands. Next slide, please. We also have started deploying spotters, or basically employees that go out during conditions that are favorable for fire, mainly high wind, low humidity, and they help us get additional eyes on what's going on our system. We have adjusted the settings on our circuit breakers so that they're very sensitive, and so now they will turn the power off to areas where there's problems much quicker than they have in the past. And now, prior to re-energizing those areas that are without power, we visually inspect our system to make sure that that it's safe to re-energize before doing so. So it's important to note that both of these changes will cause more frequent and longer outages, but we feel like it'll be safer for everyone. Next slide, please. So an additional aspect of our wildfire mitigation strategy is public safety power shutoff, or PSPS. Basically, this is proactively turning off power to areas across the island, and we plan to be as strategic as possible using the information gathered from the weather stations I had previously mentioned we're deploying. Yeah, then we're going to do this during times of, again, high fire risks, so high winds, low humidity. We plan on trying to give everyone as much notification of these pending events as possible, hopefully 24 to 48 hours. We plan on communicating via email, phone, text, the app, radio, TV. And during an event, when the power is shut off, we plan on keeping everyone updated through those same communication means as far as the status. And then when weather conditions improve, we will inspect our system prior to energizing to make sure that it's safe to re-energize. Next slide, please. So this map can be found on our website, and it shows the areas of potential PSPS across Maui County. So we went out and we did inspections. We took into account the vegetation in these areas, our infrastructure, the potential for fires to impact communities, the prevailing trade winds, and we consulted with industry experts to try to keep these orange areas as small as possible. Next slide, please. If you are interested in learning more about PSPS or the public safety power shutoffs, there's a ton of information on our website, hawaiianelectric.com. It includes like guides to help you prepare for a PSPS event. There's communication forms in there if you are dependent on electricity for medical needs. There's FAQs. There's even maps that you can go and input the address for your home, for example, to see whether it falls within or outside a potential PSPS area. And I just want to reiterate that the maps that I've previously shown with the orange areas, those are the potential PSPS areas. The actual shutoffs will depend on the specific weather in those locations at the time based on our weather stations. Next slide, please. So if a website is not the way you like to get your information, we've also been going out into the community to talk to folks and help prepare everybody for these potential PSPS events. We have two coming up on July 13th, one on the west side in Napili and one in central Maui at Queen Ka'ahumanu Center. I hope to see you all there. Next slide. So I want to thank everybody for coming out and listening to Hawaiian Electric's plans tonight. If you have any questions or just want to say hello, you can always contact us at the email shown on the screen. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks to the Hawaiian Electric team for that presentation. Before I get to reading off people who wanted to make public comment tonight, is there any questions on presentation so far that you need clarification on? Okay, hold on. I'm going to be also a runner and get this mic to you.
I can be loud enough without a mic, actually. In terms of the locations for some of these future projects, sea level specifically, have you considered things like storm surge and hurricanes and tsunamis? Like, for instance, like Malaya right now would be like gone if any of that were to take place. Luckily, it's closing. But are the new solar panels and other projects going to, and control circuits going to be slightly above sea level so that they're not wiped out by a future storm?
Yes, actually we have. So all of our procurements, starting with the stage 1, have required the projects to be outside of the tsunami zone. So a project like Maui wouldn't be able to bid in today. Yeah.
I'm just curious, and not real important, but you showed how much rooftop production we had. Do you have an amount of the battery backup for the rooftop?
Mark, you.
Yeah, I think we'd have to get back to you. We don't have that number offhand, but the majority of rooftop solar systems that are being installed these days are being paired with batteries, like upwards of 90+%. So it's and that's been for the last probably 2-3 years. So there's a good chance from then on they're all paired with batteries.
You don't have ability to receive all of that. We're on the battery energy program. And a couple hours we can be in a while. Are you still adding people to that?
Yeah. So there's new programs that just opened as well on Maui, the bring your own device program that folks can sign up for, and there's other options as well. And all of those programs are open, and we're able to approve applications. In terms of megawatts, the new programs just started, so I mean we can get you some numbers. Yeah.
Yeah, just a question about the retirement of the diesel engines at the Maui station. One chart, it indicates 50 megawatts would be retired between 2028 and 2030. And on the chart with the reserve margins, it indicates a larger decline from 208 megawatts to 119 megawatts. So is there larger retirement than the 50?
That's a good question. So the 50 megawatts that I mentioned for the Mitsubishi engines at Malaya, that's basically mandatory retirements. That's going to happen whether we wanted to or not. On Mark's slide with the energy reserve lines, that also includes the retirements of M1 through 9, which are part of our integrated grid plan that Mark talked about. But those are I don't say optional. Those are our plans. If the renewable resources come online as planned, those will be retired. Whereas the Mitsubishis, they're going to go away whether we want them to or not.
Just a brief comment on the presentation, the maps that were produced. It's mostly ocean. You should enlarge the map so people can read them better, but also put on highways so people can see where they are. Right now, they're just orange blocks without indicating what residential areas are covered.
I think I do know, Dick, that I was informed Hawaiian Electric, you can actually now type in your address exactly show you if you're in or out. So it was at this stage, their GIS people are constantly kind of updating the program. So I believe, yes, right? I believe you can now go in, type in your address, and it can actually tell you exactly if you're in or out of the line. Any other?
Has Maui Electric thought about or will they give thought to economic disparity and prejudice? There are homeowners who they own the home, they have solar power on the roof, they have battery storage, but that is a very small portion of the population. There are lots of others that are renters, for example, and with the PSPS outages, they will be more impacted than people who, let's say, have more means. Is there any thought to that, at least in the future, where there maybe are programs that could help people in the lower economic bracket to get through these power outages that, like you said, perhaps may last longer and be over several days?
I will say that there are different programs. It's not necessarily through Hawaiian Electric. We do have a docket looking at community-based renewable energy. That's still kind of working its way through with a couple of private developers that have proposed a few projects. I will say, from the commission standpoint, we would like to see that probably enlarge itself. I have been talking to the state energy officer. Right now, I think it's a 5 megawatt max on the CBRE projects. We want to see if we can expand it to 10 megawatts, which we believe we can, but it'll take some, right, kind of looking at this and see what kind of benefit we get. But I don't know if there's any other Hawaiian Electric programs looking at LMI or other small community or smaller. I don't know, Matt, if you don't.
I was just going to say thank you for the comment. We appreciate that. This is our first year sort of implementing the PSPS, and we plan to get better every year. So it's comments like that I think can help us make the program better and hopefully lessen the impact to our customers. Appreciate that.
I do have one suggestion. And there are places like Community Religious for the company side point. I think their board members are struggling looking at solar on the roofs, etc., etc. Is there a program that Maui Electric has for making board in these boards and making that a way forward program?
We don't have, I think, a program, but our distributed energy resources team, who's not here tonight, they do have resources available online, and they're also available. I believe they will do, phone calls or meet with members of the community if they're interested in learning more about all of the different programs we have for rooftop solar. And then also we do, as the chair mentioned, have our community-based renewable energy program, which, for a larger rooftop, that would be probably an excellent program. And then all of the residents could potentially, if structured correctly by the person developing it, could, have a share of the energy produced by that project.
Okay. Let me go through the list that I got so far. And first one to had signed up is William Bennett, Energy Consulting. You want to? All right, thanks. Dick, you were next.
Thank you very much. And thank you, all of you, for coming over from Oahu. This is a landmark evening, having you all come over. It's been a long time. The Consumer Advocate had a meeting here. The PUC had a meeting here. Maui Electric has had a number of meetings, and we appreciate those. A couple of comments. First, we're talking about energy, Maui's energy future, but we've only talked about electricity. A very important part of our energy future is transportation that will probably be in electric vehicles. And so we need to make that transition. We need to incorporate that. And it's unclear whether the 2045 date is referring to electricity, non-renewable, or all energy items being non-renewable, being renewable. And I think that's something that needs to be clarified in our discussions. We need to be much more proactive in getting PV on Ohana units. We have on Maui, probably much more than on Oahu, a share of our island residents living in Ohana units, probably many, many thousands. There's no incentive for owners to put a PV on there or even solar hot water on those units. So I would urge the PUC to make provision in the docket that we make sure that lower income people who are renting will also have the benefits of Ohana. And by far the cheaper way of going that way is getting hot water heated without having to rely on PV. It's a much cheaper and no mention was made of that. There's a need to figure out on our island whether it will be better for us to make a big effort to get centralized PV, big solar farms, or is it cheaper to do it on people's roofs, on factories, on warehouses, et cetera. We should be able to know which is a less expensive way of getting electricity produced, distributed or centralized, and be able to then push the one that's less expensive. The same thing with batteries. Many people are now putting in batteries for their cars. Is that the cheapest way for us to be doing things? Should we have centralized battery stations tied to a solar grid or independently, or would it be better for every single family to try to figure out how and where to put a battery up in their house? Which one is cheaper? And we should, again, push the less expensive method. I heard no mention of energy demand, electricity demand, and I'm particularly thinking of the conversion to EV vehicles. What will happen if, let's say, by 2030, 2035, we now have 50, 60, 80% of the vehicles on this island using EV? Has any of this been accounted for in the presentation that we heard tonight? And I think it's very important to consider those options. I'm very concerned that the batteries the battery backup that's being required at all the solar and wind farms is for 4 hours. That will take care of an evening need, but it does not take care, excuse me, of Kona storms. We occasionally have, every few years and sometimes twice in a year, Kona storms that last 2 or 3 days with almost no solar energy being produced, or very, very little. We have no backup for that. And so I would urge the PUC to investigate not just the 4-hour overnight type of thing that's being done now at the solar farms and wind farms. I didn't hear anything about who's going to pay as we decommission both Kahului and Maalaea. Who's going to pay for any stranded costs? Are the consumers going to have to pay those costs? Will the company have to eat those costs? And I think those are very big financial decisions for the county. I would also urge that just as we have tonight, for the first time really, a meeting looking at Maui's energy future, that some kind of a community energy committee be established, made up of some community representatives, and perhaps somebody from the county planning and sustainability office, and perhaps somebody from the utility, a group of maybe 7 to 10 people, 12 people who will meet on a quarterly basis and look at the various plans, make proactive suggestions and recommendations. I think it would be very helpful. Most of you work in Honolulu, and we have no contact. The consumer advocate mentioned, come to our meetings. There's never been a meeting on Maui that we could attend, and we can't fly over to Oahu for those kind of things. Maybe one person can, but most of us can't. So those are just some ideas that I have, and I would hope that you will be able to look at those. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. I do know from your first one about the RPS, the 100% RPS. It was always electricity, because at first it was electricity sales, right? And then it was recently changed to all generation. It needs to be 100%. So that's the RPS, right? Transportation is also part of the bigger one that's trying to get to net zero, right? 100%, well, net zero, hopefully below that number if you can go negative zero. But that's for the greenhouse gas emissions, right? And that's another, it's not tied to RPS. It's kind of related, but that's where transportation is being taken care of.
Just given the fact that we have EV vehicles increasing, we have to integrate the two. They can't be separate.
So I do know, I think in the IGP, right, the increase of EV eventually is already integrated in. So that's the IGP plan. That's the most updated plan as far as energy future throughout, well, at least in the service territories that Hawaiian Electric has. Mark Nolan Johnson.
So thank you for this opportunity to speak. Here, I'm an independent renewable energy advocate, and I want to bring to Maui's attention that there is an innovation, a company called Solartron Energy out of England that has come up with a solar concentrator array that features some innovations. It's a 20 megawatt system, and it produces like 53,000 plus kilowatts per year. But it has this particular system addresses the land use question or dilemma. How do we significantly increase solar electric production, but at the same time keep a small land use footprint? As this array uses, let's say, the area of a small parking lot. But there's not only this innovation, there are many dish or parabolic systems in existence. This particular company has come up with an innovation, and I have that innovation detailed in a handout that each of you are welcome to take. And the innovation drastically reduces the cost of such a system. And in addition to the solar array, another company has come up with what they call, and that's Energy Vault Holdings, has come up with if you could see the graphic of a tower with composite blocks that are raised or lowered, and this is an excess electrical storage system, and it's been dubbed the Newton battery. As of course, it's a gravity system. So the two systems combined offer a cost-effective way to increase electricity production. And I just wanted to point out, looking back at the other slide, that is it this one? That the company licenses the technology, but you cannot simply buy the finished product. The idea is that they license the technology, provide expert advice over approximately the 1 year period of manufacture and deployment. And the purpose is to encourage manufacturing near the site of deployment. So this is another possible commercial venture for those so inclined in Hawaii to manufacture these particular parabolic systems for deployment throughout many islands in the Pacific could take advantage of such a system. And so I invite you to take a flyer on what I submitted to the PUC on the website. Thank you.
Councilmember Cook. I'm getting to you.
Well, didn't expect to speak, but I'm glad to be here. Had the pleasure to interact with Maui Electric's crew for 3 different events in the last couple of weeks, and feel very confident and impressed in the direction. I did happen to get to work with Maui Electric like 25 years ago. I think it was the last county fair at the old fairgrounds. And they put up a power pole for Jamie Woodburn and I, and we put up a Intertech wind generator, which was one of the first ones that backfed into this system. It was really a piece of crap, had a disc brake, and when it broke, I had to lasso a few of them up country to stop. So that's my experience with alternate energy. I also cast all the concrete blocks over here for the solar. So I just encourage everybody to be positive and innovative, not be so paranoid about the potential problems, but focus on the potential solutions. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Councilmember Jason. You did it? You signed it? Okay. Joseph Stewart.
I would just like to say thank you to everybody for showing up. This is my first time coming to speak publicly about something like this, but I'm just another civilian on the island, like the majority of you. And unfortunately, Maui seems to be a place that is centralized and preyed upon by outside investors and outside companies and corporations. One of the questions that I had about Hawaiian Electric is what percentage of the proceeds actually stays on the island to generate our economy? Because everybody here has an electric bill and they all pay it. How much of that money actually stays on the island to benefit the island after you guys cover the cost of doing business to maintain our infrastructure? My other question that I had was because running lines in the air is outdated technology. That's from like the Victorian era. We can run ground lines and then we don't have half of these problems that cause these infrastructure issues. Another issue I'd like to bring up is if we change the building codes to imply more solar, then every house that has a solar system and a battery system would then be able to be independent. If we had smart selectors on it, then they could help power their neighbor's house after they have a potential outage. So it would really help benefit the entire grid overall. And my last thing I'd like to say is I think that our power should be a publicly owned utility. It is privately owned right now and publicly traded. The top shareholders are Vanguard, State Street, and BlackRock. Same with Next Era Energy, who potential merger was almost going to happen. I'm glad it didn't. But I definitely think that our power should be owned by us. There's a couple of different entities on the mainland that do this. There's a couple other islands that do this. Lanai is kind of starting to get into that outfit with some of their new houses that they put on. I know people that have houses. They don't have an electricity bill. They generate enough solar for their house, for their neighbor's house, for their other neighbor's house. And it seems like a really good way to go for our island. And if we did have a publicly owned utility, then all of the proceeds after managing the business would come back to the citizens that pay into it as a dividend. And I think that's the way that Maui should go because it's a lot more sustainable. It keeps our resources here. It keeps greedy hands out of it, and it helps benefit our entire island for longevity, for sustainability, which is something that doesn't necessarily seem to be on the docket for the average citizen.
Thanks, Joseph. Jay Penniman.
I didn't really plan on saying anything. I just appeared here. But I would like to say that infrastructure-wise, we definitely advocate for attempting to get as much of the transmission and distribution system underground or on-grounded. I think this would deal with a lot of the power shutoff issues that you have to come up with. And for my specialty, wildlife, birds in particular, you will definitely run into far fewer issues if you can prioritize putting a lot of the lines underground or on ground. Thanks.
The last one I got signed up is Sharon. Then we're going to go to the folks online.
Thank you. So I have a couple of points, thoughts, questions, I guess. With the creation of the new refuse site that's been approved for all the Lahaina toxic waste, I guess. Has there been any thought about leaving open a research or thinking about an RFP maybe in the future to try and harness some of that energy, the biodiesel, compost, thinking about refuse in the long run and our garbage and how we can maybe try to harness some of that energy or think about something like that? And are there plans to return the land in the INA back to the natural state after the power plants retire in those areas? I'm assuming that there's no consideration of changing the diesel engines out for other types of energy producers when those are retired. And I spoke with someone who retired from HAEMA, and he mentioned that the Army Corps of Engineers could be helping with the polls, and that that's something that might be, I don't know if that's been harnessed or asked of them yet, but he mentioned that that was something that we should request. And last thing is, I'm originally from the Midwest, and we have tornadoes, and they have tornado watches, and they have tornado warnings. So when you go in to watch, you don't go in the basement. You wait till there's a warning, right? And I feel like that would be something to consider as far as these rolling energy fallouts, you know, or something of a test like, hey, did you know that your address, that your power would have gone off, rather than, I'm afraid about people losing so much of their energy with their refrigerators. And you mentioned the medical points of view, and so I will look online, but I think that's something that we just should consider long-term our goals. Thank you.
Thanks. Andrew, I guess I'll go to anyone online, I think. Was there none? All right. Any other? Okay. Was notified. If anyone in the public that if you did submit testimony in the period between June 24th and tonight, we asked that you resubmit them. We checked our system. It wasn't taking, right? It was submitted and then it wasn't recording it. So ask that if you do have any public comments, just send them again. And you can do that by email at puc@hawaii.gov. And then there's also instructions that our staff has, and we got them at the table up front. With that, if there's no other public comments, I do want to thank all of you. This is something, as Dick said, it's something new actually. Right? The commission is a regulatory body. We're not the planning body. We're not the folks. And there's a energy office that does some of this work as well. But we wanted to come out because these issues is what we are seeing, right? And at the end of the day, we have to deal with some of these issues, especially as it concerns Hawaiian Electric. When Mike was speaking, Mike DiCaprio was speaking about not being able to have the parts. I will say, right, Hawaiian Electric is not alone. When I joined the commission, I remember going to a private wastewater company that was coming in for a rate case, and we got to tour their facility, and their technology was already 35 years old, right? And I remember watching one of their workers really taking apart and trying to MacGyver a solution, right? And I remember telling that private water company, that's not sustainable, right? They need to really look at the infrastructure. And right, it was already obsolete by the time we saw it, right? They couldn't get parts. I remember asking the guy, like, where do you get the parts? And he's like, basically, I'm trying to, right, create it, right, with sheet metal and the like. So that is for all of our utilities, right? We've been telling them that's unsustainable, right? You're going to run into bigger problems. And granted, they don't serve, right, a community as big as, say, Hawaiian Electric, right? It's a smaller community, but still, right? They have the obligation to serve, right? Whatever they're doing. So we're taking a look at this from all angles, right? The different industries that we regulate, and also the different islands, right? This is not just a Maui Island issue, right? It's going to come to bear on the Big Island, even at the co-op on Kauai, right? They just got they were approved for a pump storage hydro that would have taken them to be 80% renewable thereabout, right? But with the lawsuits and the like, and that project is being pulled back. So now they're back down to where they are right before they started their project. So they're at 60. They need to now figure out what's the next thing. So, right, and in the same time frame as everyone else. So, right, we see that if they don't, come to solutions over at, KIUC, they might run into the same problem, right, that you're seeing here on Maui in the next couple of, 4 or 5 years. So, as we see these items, we are probably going to have public informational meetings like this on those islands to make sure that everyone is aware and we can have this open discussion about any possible solutions that, our utilities can look at. And like I said, it's not just electricity, right? We deal with public-private water companies. We deal with the water carriers, the motor carriers, and the like. And I've always said, to your point, Dick, earlier, right? If we're going to get to 100%, they're doing things too, right? To get to 100%. And sometimes we forget about them, right? They're doing it. I get serviced by a private wastewater company out where I live in Honolulu, and they're doing stuff to get to 100% renewable, right? So I don't want to ignore them either, right? I mean, yes, we're focused on electricity, but like you said, Dick, right? It's all, right? It's just a whole slew of different industries that are going to get us to the 100% renewable and the net zero goals. So with that, I would like to thank you for coming tonight. Hope that this was informational. At any time you want to contact us, Hawaiian Electric, or even the consumer advocate, you have our contact information and we'll make that available as well. And with that, I would like to thank all of you. Thank you for coming tonight. Aloha.